So good morning. So I also would like to congratulate the Commission, thank you, the Commission on African Affairs for this splendid Congress, real accomplishment. And I also would like to thank Alfred Odhiambo from Kenya, who helped me in this talk, who contributed to some of the topics, and who helped me to better stick to the realities of the African continent. Actually, we were supposed to meet yesterday, but my flight was delayed, and we have not met yet. Is Alfred in the room? No. So brain imaging. So, no doubt that neuroimaging is central to the assessment of patients with epilepsy, and that imaging has dramatically modified the management of epilepsy patients. MRI can identify substrates underlying epilepsy and guide clinicians in the determination of treatment, in particular epilepsy surgery, and in the determination of prognosis. The use of CT scan has been diminished because of the superior sensitivity and specificity of MRI. But overall, these results of all types of imaging studies should be always correlated with the clinical and the neurophysiological data. But CT scan, of course, is still a very useful tool. It is useful in acute situations when the suspected cause of seizures is an insult such as hemorrhage or abscess. CT scan has a high sensitivity to brain calcifications, like in tuberous sclerosis or Sturge-Weber. But, of course, CT is not as sensitive or as specific as MRI when it comes to identify the common epileptogenic abnormalities, small tumors, vascular malformations, malformations of cortical development, and lesions in the mesial temporal lobe. But CT remains the first-line investigation for epilepsy, in particular when MRI is not available or contraindicated in case of cardiac pacemaker or the presence of neurosurgical metallic clips. MRI, of course, ideally most patients who develop epilepsy or with chronic epilepsy should be investigated with MRI. And in newly diagnosed epilepsy, MRI may identify epileptogenic lesions in 12 to 14% of the case, but this goes up to 80% in the patient with recurrent chronic seizures. And we can find in most of these cases a structural abnormality on MRI. Brain imaging should not be done in every patient, and it is not required in patients with a definite electroclinical diagnosis of idiopathic generalized epilepsy or benign childhood epilepsy with centrotemporal spikes. So there are some situations where brain imaging should be not excluded, but is not a priority. If access to MRI is limited, the essential indications for MRI are evidence of a progressive neurological disease or deficit and refractory focal seizures. And just to give an example, showing the contrast between the good sensitivity of MRI for the cortical tubers, this is a case of tuberous sclerosis, you can see the cortical tuber, there are many of them, which can be detected by MRI, whereas we can see the high sensitivity to the calcified subependymal nodules with CT scan. What are the main epileptogenic substrates? Hippocampal sclerosis, malformations of cortical development, brain tumors, vascular malformations, and the category of acquired damage like trauma, cerebrovascular disease, or infections. Hippocampal sclerosis, as we know, has been the triumph of MRI in epilepsy by permitting to detect this abnormality localized in the mesial temporal lobe. And here we can see that the usefulness of the different sequences. The T1 sequences showing very well the anatomy, the differentiation between the white matter and the gray matter, and here the small hippocampus reduced in volume as compared to the other side. And in this case, you can see that the atrophy is dramatic. The T2 sequences are also useful because they are more sensitive, and we can see this hyper signal which projects on the middle of the Hammond's horn here. But the highest sensitivity is obtained with the T2 flare sequence that neutralize the CSF signal, and we can see this hyper-intensity projecting upon the hippocampus on this flare sequence. There always should be a collaboration between the clinician and the radiologist, and the clinician must tell the radiologist what his main hypotheses are before the exam is performed. And when we have a hypothesis of temporal lobe epilepsy, we must ask for sequences or sections taken perpendicular to the long axis of the hippocampal formation, which gives the best anatomy. And in spite of the fact that MRI does not provide an histological diagnosis, in this case, MRI correlates relatively well with the cell death, correlates very well with the gliosis, which are the two main pathological components in hippocampal sclerosis. Now, if we have only a CT scan, is CT scan sensitive enough for detecting hippocampal sclerosis? We know that there is an indirect sign, which is the temporal horn of the lateral ventricle, and sometimes this temporal horn may be enlarged or dilated. And it could be an indirect sign, but this sign is not entirely reliable, because on this MRI we can see that here the lateral horn of the temporal horn of the ventricle is enlarged, but this does not mean that the structure is sclerotic. So CT scan cannot be a reliable tools for hippocampal sclerosis. The second triumph of MRI is the domain of malformations of cortical development. And in this case, it's a focal cortical dysplasia with the modified gyration, the thickening of the cortex, and this hyperintensity going like a cone toward the ventricle. This is a very typical aspect of focal cortical dysplasia. We know that we can find subependymal heterotopias, unilateral in this case, symmetrical, almost symmetrical on this case. Band heterotopia, the double cortex syndrome that we can observe. In this case, sometimes the differentiation or the line of white matter between the two layers, the normal layer and the abnormal layer, is very thin, and sometimes it can be missed if we don't look very carefully. Polymicrogyria and schizencephalopathy. So polymicrogyria, it's an excessive number of small and prominent convolutions, and it's frequently identified as an abnormality of neuronal migration. It's often associated with a cleft or a schizencephaly, and importantly, such a discovery may lead to a genetic analysis. In this case, it's a GPR56 mutation in a consanguineous family, and so sometimes the discovery of a brain malformation on MRI may have some consequences, may lead to some genetic counseling. And this is a more complex hemimegalencephaly with the thickening of the cortex, this modified gyration, and subcortical heterotopias. Now I go quickly through the vascular malformation, cavernoma, and we can see that the different sequences, this T2 sequence is very sensitive to blood products. You know, this very dark area is because of the degradation of blood products. On this side, it is an arteriovenous malformation. Brain tumor, very classical, and in this case, CT scan can be useful, can be sufficient. Here, a meningioma, here an infiltrating glioma, and here probably a metastasis with a huge edema. Brain traumatism is a major cause of epilepsy, whether we find huge and multiple brain damage, bitemporal plus frontal in this case, or something very small, very tiny, sometimes difficult to identify, but which may have a very strong value from a legal point of view sometimes. The domain of infection, and here again CT scan provides right information most of the case. Cysticercosis with the MRI and the multiple cysts. Here the calcifications, which are of course better seen on the CT scan, and this is an hidatidosis case. Infections, Calixte Coité has shown some of these brain imaging aspects with brain abscess in the context of an immunodepression or not, and this is a case of tuberculoma. All these images being very, very well known. Encephalitis. Encephalitis, and this is a case of herpes virus encephalitis. And you see at the beginning, at day 1 or 2, we have only this hyper signal in the left hippocampus. But a few days later, we have the extension of the process involving most of the mesial temporal lobe, and still, because of this limbic predominance of the brain damage, we can also observe the extension of the brain damage to the insular region. And similar aspects may be seen in this context of torch infections in children. Cerebrovascular disease. On this case, we have an old middle cerebral artery infarction, probably perinatal, a frequent cause of seizures, and in this case, a recent stroke, again in the middle cerebral artery here. Most importantly, the brain imaging, and in particular MRI, may give a prognosis notion. And for instance, this is the work that we have done, if we compare the probability of remaining 1 year seizure-free as a function of the pathological substrate, we can see that it's 54% in case of stroke, or 46% in case of tumor, but it goes down in case of trauma lesion, and you see it's only 24% probability, or 11% probability in case of hippocampal sclerosis, 24% in case of malformation of cortical development. So not only these tools provide a precise diagnosis, but it also helps to refine the prognosis. But we must be very careful when interpreting these documents of brain imaging. Again, the structural brain imaging should be always interpreted as a function of the clinical and the EEG data. Some images may be purely incidental. MRI does not provide an histological diagnosis, just information, but not a definite diagnosis. And we must always be very systematic when we review an exam, because sometimes we found a lesion and we say, okay, we found it, but there are many cases with multiple images with dual pathology. A few examples. How can we interpret this type of image with this abnormal, the persistence of a big embryological radiating vein? If a patient has a 2 or 3 generalized tonic-clonic seizure at night, how this should be interpreted? As purely incidental, unrelated? Could it be the cause? Again, we must have a very precise clinical and electrophysiological analysis to see if a relationship may be established between this lesion and the clinical situation of the patient. If we are sometimes too much polarized, too much focused on the hippocampus, on the hippocampal formation, and we worked at Salpêtrière a lot on the malformation of the hippocampus, and we were focused here on this hippocampus, which is a little bit too round, too big, and we might be a little bit dysgenetic, and we nearly missed something that was a couple of centimeters behind, with this small spot here of heterotopia. So one lesion or one image should not prevent us to look for others. And again, a systematic review of the exam from the temporal, the frontal pole to the occipital pole is indispensable. We must be also very, very careful when we see, for instance, an abnormal signal in the temporal lobe, like in this case, and say, oh, this is hippocampal sclerosis. No. And we have some cases of what we call limbic encephalitis, and in particular autoimmune limbic encephalitis, like this case. And we know that these situations may be associated with a number of intracellular onconeuronal antibodies or some membrane or synaptic antibodies, some of them being associated with the neoplasm, the old paraneoplastic limbic encephalopathy. So again, we must always keep our attention and be ready to find another diagnosis. Okay. And by the way, these limbic encephalitis in nature have very inflammatory pathological substrates, exactly like in Rasmussen encephalitis, we also have this inflammatory pathological substrate, but the circumstances of diagnosis, this is in in children, whereas the limbic encephalitis are more in adults, and the discovery of a neoplasm is not the case in Rasmussen encephalitis. One of the advantages of MRI is this possibility of having longitudinal studies, of repeating the exams. And for instance, this is a case of patients with, he had a generalized tonic-clonic seizure, and this is the baseline MRI, which was normal. Then he had a status of focal seizures involving the left temporal lobe, and we found this hypersignal and edema in the left hippocampus. We could have simultaneously an ictal SPECT showing the hyperperfusion in this left hippocampus, but 6 months later, we could observe hippocampal sclerosis as a consequence of this process. And you know now that we can, with brain imaging, we can study the natural course of hippocampal sclerosis, and we can observe in some kids who have had complex febrile seizure, we can observe the hypersignal and the edema at the time of the seizures, or 2 or 3 days later, but 2 or 3 months later, we can observe this tendency to atrophy. So this permits to really, and this is a very good clinical, very good tool for clinical research. And to finish with, this is a case of cortical malformation, and of course MRI is a common anatomical referential when we contemplate epilepsy surgery. And this is a cortical malformation here in the precentral region with abnormal gyration. I pass to the seizure. We made an ictal SPECT. You can see this ictal SPECT subtracted with the interictal SPECT, and we can have the precise spot of hyperperfusion at the moment of a seizure. This is what is called ictal SPECT. And also, we used functional MRI to lateralize the speech areas, and mainly in this patient to localize the functional areas involving the hands. And when the left hand was involved, we can see this large activation. But the patient, because of the repetition of seizure, because of the quite permanent postictal state, was quite unable to activate her right hand. But still, we had this overlap between the activation of her right hand and the posterior part of the malformation, as you can see, which resulted in a limited surgery, and we could only remove the anterior part of the malformation. She was still involved, not completely, she was still improved, not completely seizure-free or whatever. I can conclude on 2 directions. of course, we can have a futuristic view of brain imaging and the multimodal approach, combining tractography, combining PET scan, combining all the different tools of brain imaging. I would prefer to have a more realistic conclusion. And in the region, there is a paucity of brain imaging systems. MRI is an uncommon tool in the region, at the scale of the region. It's heterogeneous, of course. Brain imaging is critical to identify the progressive brain lesions where seizures are the first symptoms. Poor health resources led to image these progressive causes of epilepsy at an advanced stage, and this is one of the first objectives, making this diagnosis much earlier. So in big African cities where MRI is available, okay, people deal with all conventional epilepsy substrate, including mesial temporal sclerosis, gray matter heterotopia, cortical dysplasia. All these things are very well diagnosed, and they permit to consider epilepsy surgery. So it's essential to develop access to brain imaging, and this effort should be shared, is common to all neurological and neurosurgical fields. Thank you for your attention.